This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, good morning. Welcome to DEEP, Daily Editorial Enrichment Program of Law Excellence R&D. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 21st July 2019. The first article for discussion, The Dreamer of Unwelcome Amendments. So this article's fundamental argument is this. The amendments which are proposed to Right to Information Act to dilute the autonomy and independence of office for information commissioners is bad in law and also is bad for federalism and transparency in the country. Let us try to understand this article in depth. Before going into this, let us ask a much fundamental question. Why did the Constitution create certain constitutional bodies with autonomy such as Election Commission, UPSC, Comptroller and Auditor General? They have a specific function, and all these institutions do one thing. They ensure merit, they ensure protection of democracy, they ensure accountability of the government. So it means their independence is meant to act as a check against the misuse of authority by the government. And second aspect, the transparency movement which started in India after 2000 has culminated itself as Right to Information Act. Today it is taken as an example across the world. In this context, it can be clearly stated that RTI Act is an important tool or instrument for transparency and accountability in India. You know that it has decreased the exclusive control of the government on information. And second, it threw the light on every functioning of the government. And finally, it also ensured that government answerable to the people and any of the misgivings of the government are put to accountability. It means it was also able to reduce corruption in the government. So, one thing is institutional autonomy is necessary and the constitution has recognized that. And the next is RTI has given an information commission and independence of it will promote accountability and transparency which are essential to maintain citizen oversight, and this citizen oversight is need of the democracy in India. So in this case what the government is trying to do, it wants to dilute the autonomy. How? Remember, constitutional bodies and few non-constitutional bodies, how they were offered autonomy. The first is they were given fixed tenure, and second, these people cannot be removed middle of their service, by the executive himself or herself. And the third thing, financial autonomy, and then the autonomy to make their own operations. So like that autonomy was offered to them. So in this case, when RTI Act was made, Central Information Commission's position was made equivalent to CEC, and other information commissioners were equivalent to election commissioners. And the second thing, state information commissioners were made equivalent to chief secretary, and also they were given tenure 65 years slash 6 years. These are meant to protect their autonomy. Again and again I am stressing this word. Today these will be diluted and the government will determine their autonomy and their tenure from time to time on a case to case basis. It means that the information commissions are expected to function more like government departments. So they are seen as extension of the executive rather than independent institutions. Many of the landmark judgments of the information commissions, for example, to bring political parties under the purview of RTI and to submit the income of all the political, that is MPs and MLAs, all these are remarkable. So any dilution of information commission will not protect the transparency regime in the country. That is the argument of this article. And the next is institutional independence in India. So if you observe for the last 2 years, there are many issues which are coming up. RBI and then CAG, Election Commission, and today we have SEBI's independence is questioned, and then Information Commission's independence is under threat. So why we are diluting these democratic and financial institutions? That is what is the major question. The next article, an ally, a partner, and American unilateralism. So this is about CARTSA Act and Turkey importing S-400 missiles from Russia, and in this context, how the NATO will be affected and how India will be affected. Understand, Turkey is part of NATO. NATO is an alliance led by America and it is dominated by the Western capitalism. So, in this context, NATO is developing something called F 35 fighter craft where these countries will enjoy the interoperability. It means that the military equipment possessed by NATO members will be the same and everyone shall be able to use it, and in emergency all of them can work together. That was the objective behind it. So, bringing in Russian equipment into it, there are two dangers. One, the intelligence related to these weapons can be taken by Russia, and the second, interoperability issues are expected to come. So, in this scenario, the Turkey, defying the United States of America, is importing S 400 Triumph missiles from Russia. So these missiles do not fit into NATO system. So America wants to impose sanctions. And what America's retaliatory action, immediately Turkey was thrown out away from this F-35 program. As you are pushing it out, the Turkey will is conveniently moving towards Russia. Now Turkey wants to buy the Sukhoi advanced fighter crafts, the Sukhoi 57, Sukhoi 35 crafts. So, second thing, what might have worsened between Turkey and USA? Remember, buying of S 400 more than military move, it is about improving the bargaining power of Turkey with United States of America. So, when Obama was the president, Turkey asked United States of America at liberal price Patriot missiles. The United States of America did not oblige to it. So, now Turkey wants to diversify its arms imports so that it can increase the bargaining power with the United States of America. That can be one strategy. And second, Turkey is worried about Kurdish cessationist movements near its borders. But United States of America, for its interest in Syria, it is supporting the Kurdish people's movement. It means that the Islamic State in Syria was fought hard by the Kurdish elements. So that's why US is working closely with these Kurds, which is heartburn to the Turkey. And the third thing, US unilateralism. United States of America has passed an act that is called CARTSA Act. According to this, America can counter any of its adversary by imposing the sanctions against it and also its trade partners. And there is a waiver mechanism to it. This waiver cannot be offered to the friends. It can only offered if the adversary changes its attitude. So this kind of unilateral loss, which is trying to use its hegemony to control its partners, is heartburn to many of the countries. In this context, India's situation is also different. Because of this CARTSA Act, India is now forced to rethink on its 400 Triumph missiles and also import of the Iranian oil. See carefully over here. Russia is a long-term arms trade partner of India and also technology partner with regard to various initiatives like BrahMos missiles. So India and Turkey's situation is different. If USA was imposing sanctions on Turkey, how can it legitimize or justify allowing India to import the S-400 Triumph missiles? And the second thing is, after seizure or else stopping of this particular import of Iranian oil, the oil prices in India on rise. So in this context, India is being declared as a strategic partner, and US is about to declare India as a major non-NATO ally partner. But in spite of this, India always allowed to be strategically autonomous. So US has to rethink its unilateral moves on sovereign countries. That is the essence of this article. The next, a new beginning. It is about Sudan. Remember that Mr. Bashir, he was the president of Sudan, a kind of an dictator. Any country which is going through an authoritative regime, if there is high prices and then inflation plus corruption plus autocracy, that all is an invitation for revolution. This happened in the entire Arab Spring. But after the revolution, how the countries have dealt with themselves, is a reason for their stability. Let us take Tunisia. So after the revolution, Tunisia transformed itself as a stable democracy. Either Egypt, Libya, these are still in the state of civil war. In this context, Tunisia, the military leadership was able to recede back and put forward the civilian government in place. In the case of the present situation, that is Sudan, the military council is not willing to loosen up its power. The military elite are still clinging to their power. That is the reason why the civilian government is unable to settle in. And there is a revolution or protest against this. In this context, an agreement was reached between military leadership and civilian government towards making in some transitional arrangement. Here I want to mention about African Union, Ethiopia. So African Union did not have its wider presence in peace process in Africa. Now, the Sudanese example where African Union has mediated a solution is going to bring it laurels as an institution of peace and development in Africa. So that's why the gaining of the prominence of African Union is more important to me. Next is sucking up surplus. So remember, when an institution has to be made autonomous, what is it necessary for it? We have regulatory institutions, market regulators. What are these market regulators? SEBI, IRDA, insurance regulator, and then RBI, banking regulator. Like this, various regulatory institutions are there. These are called independent regulatory institutions. When we say independent, independence from whom? It is majorly from the government of the day and also the market operators. For example, SEBI need to be independent from the companies and IRDA need to be independent from government and insurance companies. That's how we need to argue for it as. Now, before liberalization, government itself acted as a major regulator in India. But after liberalization, as like in the United States of America, independent regulatory authorities are on rails. Today, an agency to be independent, it has to be accountable to the parliament and it need to be independent from the executive. And the second, if it has to maintain independence, one is financial, operational, and personal. These three areas it needs autonomy. So today government what it is saying, the SEBI has to take prior permission before it makes its own administrative rules. And also 75% of the money earned by the SEBI shall be put back into the government's account. It means that once it loses its own funds to the government, it has to depend upon the government funds for its sustenance. It will increase the financial independence. And this is a change in the mindset of the government where government is looking today that it can act as a better regulator than the independent regulators. And the next, ignoring the proportionality principle. So normally in our exam when we argue the or merit of certain laws passed by the parliament, especially criminal laws, one thing we talk of is proportionality principle. So or a death penalty has to be given to rape. So is the punishment and the crime are proportional to each other or not? In these circumstances, proportionality principle says that any crime that is committed and the punishment which is offered has to be proportional to the damage which it causes to society and to the victim. So here, if punishment either is too huge or too less, it violates the principle of proportionality. So other than that, don't go much into this article. Remember what is this proportionality principle. Tomorrow let's take NIA Amendment Act was passed or UAPA Amendment Act was passed. And if they are talking about more harsh punishments, then we have to apply this proportionality principle to make a judgment of that particular law. The next is an invasive and inefficient tool. Today, law enforcement agencies, especially the police, are using facial recognition technology and they are connecting that with CCTNS, crime control tracking network systems. In this case, the challenge is this. Every person's face input is taken, these are stored in a system and they are compared to the databases. It means Government without authorization, it is collecting the facial features of the people and storing them. Is this not invasion of one's privacy? And the second, the government is concluding everyone as guilty unless proven otherwise. The dictum has to be opposite. Everyone is innocent unless proven otherwise. This has to be changed. So this mass surveillance and attitude surrounding it need to be improved. And the second is this technology efficient? Remember one thing, the technological efficiency depends upon how many false positive and false negative cases with it will be. If more false positive cases comes up, it is inefficient, and also it is dangerous to the human rights. What are false positive cases? Let's take a criminal is there and the software failed to read his features properly and tries to identify one's face with the criminals. It is going to violate the rights of that individual. These are called false positives. So most of the Indian faces are similar. So in this context, the facial recognition, when it fails to understand the diversity that is existing, then it will be a major challenge. So as its efficiency is in doubtful, countries in cities in United States of America like San Francisco, in UK, London have discontinued this. But India is embracing this very quickly. So we have to see its utility. And the next point is, to protect the privacy, data protection law is supposed to be passed. Before passing of this law, making this kind of technologies into law enforcement hands is not advisable. One party has access to 90% of poll funds. You know, after electoral bonds have come into existence, the BJP became the richest party in the country, and more than 90% of the funds belong to BJP, and all the political parties put together, they don't even have 10% of the funds. So in this context, where the political funds majorly comes from, corporate donations, these are. So the corporate donations, when they dominate, the policy shifts away from the poor people to the advantage of the corporates. So what is being suggested is, either we shall shift to the people funding, that is called as crowdfunding, or the second thing is, we shall ban the private funding completely and shift towards the state funding of elections. So this is what is the importance of this article. And the next is, Center's Jammu and Kashmir playbook goes down to the grassroots. So Rajiv Gandhi government, if we recollect, he tried one thing. He had the power at the center, and the most of the state governments are ruled by opposition. And then he tried to strengthen the local governments, so that he can bypass the state governments and transfer the funds directly to local governments. Now, what center is trying to do in the state of Jammu and Kashmir is this. First, existing elite of the Jammu and Kashmir has to be changed. It means new people has to come in the political chessboard. That's why the local governments have to be encouraged and funds have to be transferred to them. If 4,000 plus new representatives at the local level comes up, alternative leadership and alternative voice is going to be developed in Kashmir. And the second, the governance framework has to be strengthened. The discretionary powers which the officers possess over there or the state government possesses over there have to be reduced. So, strengthening rule based order rather than discretionary benefits to the poor. It means that previously, through the patronage networks, state authorities determined what has to be given to whom. Rather than that, today, rules based offering of the benefits has to be brought in. This is what this article talks about. In this context, anti corruption bureau, it has come into existence in Jammu and Kashmir now, and the center has established this during the president's rule. And the second thing is, the Jammu and Kashmir Bank, which is stated to be the primary bank in this region, was brought under investigation. So the finances can be better organized. The finances to separatists, etc., can be well regulated by the center. So this is how carrot stick is working in the case of Jammu and Kashmir. Finally, thank you very much. So today we are going to upload this particular questionnaire which I gave for every article. These are patterns of thinking. You think on those lines so that you get answers to many of the questions. You develop your own answers through thinking. I will also get this PDF uploaded below your that particular video in YouTube. Please follow that. Thank you very much again.